Good evening, everyone. My name is John Baker, and I'm the superintendent for the Redwood City Elementary School District. Thank you for joining us for our first virtual community presentation. Tonight's agenda will be student-focused work, presentations from 4 of our subcommittees that are working on the reopening of our schools in August of 2020. We will also be addressing some of the current public health guidelines as the committees present work to you. And then for your questions, we would like you to please ask questions on the side of the presentation where you're allowed to chat and ask questions. During the presentations, if we are able to answer those questions, we will do so. It will most likely be towards the end of our presentations this evening. If your questions are not answered, please be reassured that we'll take the questions and we'll respond to them with responses on our website. So this evening, we are following the San Mateo County Office of Education's Pandemic Recovery Framework for Schools. That was given to us about 2 weeks ago for us to start our planning for reopening schools in the fall. We were also given the California Departments of Education Stronger Together guidelines for safe reopening of California's public schools right after the San Mateo guidelines came out. We are following each of those documents very closely to help us start the beginning of the planning for reopening schools in August. Please remember, as we continue to plan, that we are definitely focusing on a quality education for all of our students within the Redwood City School District. And please remember that, safety for our students and our staff is our #1 priority as we come back to schools. Tonight's presentations will be given to you by 4 subcommittees. These subcommittees are facilities, which includes the wellness and health portion of that subcommittee. Educational services will be giving you a brief summary or overview of what they are doing at this point in time to plan for the reopening of schools in August. Technology and distance learning will be giving you information on what that technology and distance learning will look like when we return. And childcare. Childcare is a subcommittee that will definitely give you some information. Not all the information do we have at this point in time that will answer all your questions in regard to childcare. We are seeking assistance not only from entities within our own community within the Redwood City School District, but also childcare agencies that can help us that are within San Mateo County, because by ourselves we cannot handle the childcare situation and concerns and questions that parents have. So we broaden that spectrum to help us in that arena. Again, thank you so much for attending this first virtual community presentation. We look forward to giving you additional information in the weeks to come. Take care and thank you.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Dr. Baker. We are the Health and Wellness Facilities team. I would love to introduce my co-presenters. First, we have Michelle Griffith, who is the current principal of Garfield. And we have Martin Cervantes, who is our head of facilities. My name is Sarah Shackle, and I'm the principal of North Star. We are very excited to bring you the work that we've been doing over the past month. It's really been an honor to work with this fantastic team. Today, we're going to be going through the public health guidelines, specifically that we've been working on and how that's going to affect our schools in Redwood City. So I'm going to hand it over to Michelle, who's going to tell us about the 4 pillars.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening. The Redwood City School District understands that students, families, and staff are eager to return to school. As we look forward to reopening in the fall, we want to make sure we are offering both a high-quality education and are putting in protocols to provide safety for all. Our decisions are organized around the 4 pillars of health and hygiene, face coverings, physical distancing, and limiting gatherings. These 4 pillars will work in tandem with a phased approach for the reopening of the schools. We will now present a summary of the protocols and information we know at this time that have been developed under the guidance of public health guidelines for the reopening of schools in the fall. Under our first pillar of health and hygiene, we have temperature taking. Each day, students and staff will have their temperatures taken before entering classrooms or their work areas. No touch thermometers will be used by designated staff members. If a staff member registers a temperature, they will be sent home for further evaluation. And if a student registers a temperature, the child will move to a health waiting area, which will be designed to maintain social distancing and outfitted with dividers. The student will be monitored while waiting to be picked up by a guardian.
Thank you, Michelle and Sarah. Good evening, everyone. So the cleaning protocols for our district are as per the health guidelines. Classrooms will be cleaned on A and B schedules. We will be using an electrostatic sprayer to disinfect classrooms, offices, family centers, restrooms, hallways, and reception areas. Restrooms. In regards to the restrooms, students will be instructed to line up and enter the restrooms one at a time, sanitizing their hands before entering and when exiting the restroom. We will have hand washing signs posted inside the restrooms following the COVID-19 protocols. We will have a day custodian in charge of checking the restrooms every hour to make sure they are fully stocked and cleaned, focusing on high-touch areas. Face coverings. Again, following the public health guidelines, all staff and students will be required to wear a mask or other type of face covering, but we will be looking at every individual situation. Families will need to provide a mask for their student. A teaching video will be provided by the district. All face coverings must be washed after each use, unless of course it's a disposable mask. The district will provide 1 reusable mask per staff member and will have disposable masks in classrooms and in office in case needed for students. Don't forget to bring a mask. Teachers will be provided face shields in addition to the mask. One concern that's come up is that teachers will not be heard through the face mask. Every classroom will be equipped with an FM system to amplify the teacher's voice. Physical distancing. In the classrooms, we are estimating 12 to 15 students per cohort with 6 feet of distance at all times. Each student will have his or her own materials, no sharing. Common areas. For PE, as it stands now, it will only take place outside, equipment free, while maintaining social distancing. All multi-use buildings will be converted to health waiting areas. And food will be delivered and eaten in classrooms. Libraries, teacher rooms, some restrooms, and play structures will be closed. Workrooms will open with social distancing. Offices will have either plexiglass installed or greet visitors using the front door. Staff restrooms will have the same protocols as students' restrooms and will be serviced by the lead custodian. No use of common microwaves, refrigerators, coffee makers will be allowed at this time, and no congregation outside the classroom is allowed. Recess and lunch will occur inside the classrooms. At this time, large group events are canceled, such as festivals, open house, plays, back to school night. Facilities will not be available to rent to outside agencies at this time. Events will take place remotely, for example, such as parent conferences, cafecito, parent meetings, and field trips. Increase the sizes of groupings will be allowed as we implement the different phases per the public health guidelines. I'll turn this back over to Michelle to talk about health and wellness. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Along with our protocols for maintaining the physical health of our students, families, and staff, we also want to provide for the emotional wellness of all. In order to help guide this work, training will be provided to staff regarding the potential mental health needs that can arise in regards to the COVID-19 situation. And we will address those needs as they come up. We will survey our communities to determine the needs that exist so that we can work to provide supports. Each school will implement a social emotional learning program and community circles to continue to build the healthy social and emotional development of our children. The district, along with each school site, will publish and disseminate information for mental health resources and, when needed, provide resources to students and families. Schools will focus on providing a tiered approach for social emotional teaching and supports, and will monitor the effectiveness of these programs through a screen team.
Thank you, Michelle. So the section that many of you are probably asking about also is, what are you working on? And that is a long and extensive list, but we wanted to give you a few highlights. So the first things that we're working on specifically under temperature taking are procedures. How is it going to look when a student or staff member walks into campus? Who is going to be taking their temperature? What is that process going to look like? And where are we getting the equipment? Are we buying it ourselves? Are we getting it from the state? So those are all things that are still in process, but that we're working on. For cleaning, one of the things that's going to be essential for us is to make sure that everyone is comfortable and well aware of our cleaning process. We know there's a lot of fear and anxiety around coming back to school, and is it going to be clean enough, and am I going to be safe? Those are our top priorities. So in making it evident what's happening, in posting protocols and signs, we're hoping that we can help relieve some of those fears. We're looking at hiring and training some additional staff. So who will be doing the cleaning and when they will be doing it, scheduling and so forth. Those are specific things that we're still working on. We want to make sure that we have all of the equipment ready. So we've already started ordering it, but we're going to continue to order it and deliver it so that there's always cleaning supplies that you would need at the schools. We also know that we need a quick response time. If there's something that needs to be fixed in the bathroom or in the classroom, maybe you've run out of soap or you've run out of paper towels, we're developing a very quick response system so that that can be addressed immediately. For face coverings, we're determining who exactly will be wearing them. There's been some changes even within the last few days about that. So we'll be keeping on top of that. And by the time we start, we'll be very clear about how face coverings will work at school, whether it depends on your age or it depends on your circumstance. All of that is being looked at very carefully. We're also looking at purchasing of PPE for staff and nurses so that when our staff is interacting, they're staying safe as well. And then, of course, we want to educate everyone. How do people know, how do families know, how do staff know, how to handle masks, how to clean masks, all of those types of things. So we'll be working on that piece. For physical distancing, we need to figure out exactly how many students can safely be in a cohort. That's also something that sort of changed over time, so we'll be keeping an eye on that and set up physical classrooms so that we can maintain safety and physical distancing all the time. We want to work on actually physically marking out the spaces. Where do you stand? How do you wait? Sort of like if you were going to the store, Trader Joe's. We also want to look at flow maps for how people will be moving around campus. Where do you come in? Where do you exit? How do you do that safely while still maintaining physical distancing? We also know that teaching is key and essential, and we want to make sure that we set up effective teaching practices while still maintaining all of these social distancing and safety measures. So we'll be looking at how to do that exactly for the teachers. And then, as I said before, the entering and exiting protocols, what that will look like, where you'll come into campus, how you'll get your temperature taken, and so forth. For congregations, we would like to work on signage and monitoring of how people come together or stay apart safely together. We want to determine how brunch and lunch will work effectively, so we're in the process of working with our food service team on that. We want to figure out how to move through the different phases. We know that as the phases move, things change. So we want that to be a seamless process. And then obviously, again, an education piece. How are we teaching our families? How are we teaching our students about all of the different protocols? And as Michelle said, our emotional wellness is key and essential at this time for everyone, our students, our staff, our families. So we are talking about doing back to school videos, welcome introduction videos, maybe tour videos of the school so that students, especially students who are new to a site or new to a teacher or a grade level, will have an idea about who they are and what they look like even without face coverings. We've talked about doing meet and greets so that there's a way to meet virtually together before you're physically on campus. And then obviously looking at how we can set up very clear mental health supports, both on the individual level, on the family level, on small groups. We know that this is a key element at this time. Now, many of you asked some very good questions. We've looked through all the questions and we see that there are some sort of generalized categories. With temperature taking, as Martin said, everyone will be taking temperatures. At this point, that is the guidelines from the Public Health Department. And so, as he said, we're setting up procedures for that. Many of your questions were around what those procedures would look like. And as we said, we're working those out. So we'll be able to answer that in greater detail as we get closer to the start of school. There were some great questions about face coverings, like could you make your own? How's that going to work? The short answer is yes, we'll all have some elements of face coverings and we're happy for people to get creative as long as they are effective. So, over the summer, that would be a great thing to talk to and practice with your students. What does it feel like to wear a face covering, even inside? And also to educate ourselves on the effectiveness of face coverings. More and more it's coming out that face coverings really are an effective way to stop the spread. And so really sort of utilizing that research and information to understand and educate our kids about why we're doing it. There were some questions about hand washing versus hand sanitizing. We are setting up hand washing protocols and hand sanitizing stations. So there'll be ample opportunity for students to be able to do both of those things throughout the day. Lots of questions about supervision, who's watching the kids in specific times. Those are things we are definitely still working through. We're working with our HR team to figure out who's responsible for which elements. We have lots of really wonderful staff at all of our sites in Redwood City. So we're going to really look at utilizing everyone to make sure that students are always safe and comfortable when they are at school. And then, of course, our many questions about mental health. We have a wonderful team working on it. There's a lot of resources that we're compiling and putting together. So please know that mental health is a big focus for us, and it's something that we all feel is really essential at this time. So that is it. I want to thank our amazing team. They really have been working incredibly hard, and I'm very grateful for all of you for joining us. So have a wonderful evening, and I'll pass it on to the next presenter.
Hi, I'm Liz Wolf, and I will be the Assistant Superintendent for Ed Services, TK through 8th grade, beginning in July in the Redwood City School District. And I'm here to talk to you about the work that the Ed Services Subcommittee has done in beginning to prepare for the reopening of schools in August. There have been a number of subcommittees that have been doing this work, and we are very pleased to show you where we are and to let you know what we're still working on, because there are a lot of questions that we continue to have, and we appreciate the questions that you have asked us that help us guide us in our planning. I'm going to start off by talking about the public health guidelines, because while it would be our wildest dream to be able to bring all of the students back in August to be back in their classrooms with their teachers, the public health guidelines are important to us to follow to ensure that your students are safe, that our teachers are safe. And so our job is to figure out how to keep your child, your family, and our teachers safe while providing the highest quality educational experience. So the public health guidelines that we're looking at come from both the San Mateo County Office of Ed, as well as the San Mateo County Health Department, as well as the Coalition for Safe Schools and Communities. They recently published this pandemic recovery framework, catchy title, that gives us our guidance. In this guidance are the 4 pillars that you heard about earlier in the earlier presentation. But what I will be talking to you about are their guidelines around when students start to come back onto the campus. What the recommendation is that there be a slow rollout of students coming back in terms of the number of people on campus, the kinds of activities that are being provided, if there's any meetings that are taking place in person, and the wearing of face masks, covering our faces. And so depending on what's happening with the virus at the time, if the positive cases remain flat or decreasing, we will go into step 1, and the students will be returning in August, but there will not be any campus visitors allowed, including volunteers. Only the parents who are supporting direct instruction in preschool classrooms would be exempt from this. All extracurricular activities would be paused. All gatherings would be paused, and a gathering is considered to be a meeting or social activity that includes more than 4 people. All meetings would be held remotely, and we would all be wearing face masks, staff, students, and anybody else who enters the campus. So depending on how that goes, if all goes well, we can move into step 2, which is not quite as restrictive as step 1. Still not great, but it's a little bit better. And this also is dependent on the number of positive cases in the virus, if they remain flat or decreasing across our county. And so the campus would be open to more visitors and volunteers who are directly supporting instruction, as long as they're honoring the 4 pillars with the hand washing and the social distancing and what you heard about earlier. But as people might want to be coming in and reading to classes or doing some one-on-one support, there would be some opportunities in step 2. Once again, the extracurricular activities would be restricted. There would be the opportunity for a few of these, but they would need to directly support and intersect with instruction. So probably not a lot of sports and drama and things like that. There could be gatherings, but the group would have to be less than 10 people. And once again, face masks would be worn at all times. Step 3, we would move into, again, after 3 weeks, and depending on the guidance with the county health, that more visitors and volunteers would be allowed on campus, again, still strictly adhering to the 4 pillars. There would be a little bit more opportunities for interest-based extracurricular activities, again, in small group who could physically distance, so that could be track and different things like that. There could be some gatherings of up to 50, including the sports and activities that allow for physical distancing. Probably not golf and tennis in our elementary schools, but something to keep in mind. And once again, still wearing those face masks. So the question about these steps, of course, is, moving through them. We may not be moving through them all at the same time. Schools might be moving through them at different paces, depending on what's happening within the school. It could be a whole district movement. It could be school by school. And these will be things that we will need to be assessing as we go through the beginning of the school year next year. Another component to talk about as we do our planning is this idea of a stable cohort. And these are really weird words that have been put together, but what this means is that there is a defined group of students, and the number of the students is dictated by the ability to implement physical distancing in the classroom or in the learning setting. And right now, the physical distancing recommendation is 6 feet apart from each other. And so for us, a stable cohort would be between 12 to 15 students in the room. Again, it depends on the size of the room, probably the size of the children. So depending on that, we would develop a stable cohort of students who would stay together when they're in class, and they would go to recess together. They would pick up their lunch together, and they would go use the same bathroom right? So that we're able to kind of monitor their health and their safety. They may have more than one teacher during the instructional day. So in the middle school, for example, a stable cohort may remain in the same room, but the math teacher would come in for a period, the language arts teacher would come in for a period, the social studies teacher could come in for a period, something like that, right? So the teachers could rotate in, but the stable cohort would stay together. So those are the guidelines, right? And so it was our job to figure out what to do with that in terms of providing the highest quality educational program for your children. So this is what we know so far. There's much more that we don't know, but we'll tell you what we do know. We will be providing 2 options for families, and you saw most of this probably already in the survey that you took. But there will be 2 options for families come August. One will be a full-time distance learning option, and that will be for parents who do not want to send their children back to school at all. And so these students will receive instruction and they will work at home 100% of the time through both synchronous and asynchronous learning opportunities. And what that means is that some of their lessons will be live with their teacher and some of them will be recorded. Some of their work will be through independent work using a variety of different platforms that we have purchased for the students, and some will be guided lessons, right? That is one option. The other option is the stable cohort model, where half the children come back to school. 12 to 15 children come back in a classroom at a time. So clearly, if only 12 or 15 children come back at a time, there's not enough room in a whole school for every child to come back together. So our recommendation is that this cohort that stays together attends school in person 2 days a week, and then they work at home the other 3 days a week. And I'm going to say a little bit more about this in a minute. So that the cohort has 2 days together on site and 3 days independently at home. So what our recommendation around the days of the week are that one cohort would attend a Monday, Tuesday series, and the other cohort would attend a Thursday, Friday series. Wednesday would be off for the teachers to prepare and to plan. And Wednesday is also used for the deep cleaning that needs to take place between the cohort A and cohort B. So the rooms are, as you heard earlier, the rooms are cleaned on Monday, and then there's a deep cleaning that begins Tuesday and finishes on Wednesday. The next cohort comes in, and the rooms are cleaned Thursday afternoon, but then the deep cleaning takes place Friday after the kids go home, and Saturday if needed. So that allows for sufficient time for the very deep cleaning in between the groups of students that come in. We also know that the school schedules will be staggered a little bit, not significantly, but there will be probably different beginning times for the different grade levels to allow for temperature testing prior to entering classrooms. Now, many of you have had a number of appointments or different places where you have gone where they have taken your temperature, and you know that is a very quick process. And so we will have that same quick process as well for your children before they come into the classroom. We also know that students will be leaving close to 1 o'clock each day, and that allows for that deep cleaning of the classroom as per the public health guidelines. So what we're also working on is that because deep cleaning isn't going to take place in every classroom at the same time, some of those classrooms would be available for additional instruction to provide small group instruction for students who may have some unique learning needs. For example, RSP, English language development, reading and math interventions, targeted languages supports for the children who are in the immersion programs. This may also happen before school, right? So we're working with this to see how we can use the available classrooms that are not being cleaned or not in use at the time to provide additional supports. We also know that we need to be prepared to pivot to a full distance learning on a site-by-site level or possibly district level per the guidance from the county office and the county health department based on what's happening with the virus. And so it's very possible that we will start the school with the stable cohorts and the distance learning model, as the choices for parents. But it's possible that some of the schools or the entire district will need to pivot to an entire distance learning model, particularly if there is the fall surge that they're talking about. We're hoping that this doesn't happen, of course. So that's what we know, sort of. And this is what we are working on. So we know that last spring was bumpy for many of our teachers, for many of our students, because we had to plan in an emergency situation. Students were sent home on Friday and told not to come back on Monday. And so we had to quickly gather together materials, lesson plans, do some trainings. So we've had some time to learn from that, and we have had some time to plan. And so as we move into the fall, we feel better prepared to provide that high quality education in both of these circumstances. What we know that we are working on, you will hear more about this in the next presentation, is that the access to devices and to the internet was very challenging this past spring. And so we are working very, very hard to ensure that everyone has the device that they need at home, because everyone will be on distance learning either full-time or half-time, and that there's internet access. And so you'll be hearing from Kyle in a little bit about what are some of these options that we're investigating to ensure that this takes place well, because we know this is pivotal to the success of this model. We're looking at the weekly schedules, and we are working in our subcommittees to doing a lot of research about other countries as well as other states, and what are those schedules for students who are in class 2 days a week and at home 3 days a week. What is the best way to provide instruction? What should they be doing when they're face-to-face with the teachers, and then what are they doing when they're at home in terms of previewing materials, reviewing materials, working on enrichment activities. So those are the things that we are working on right now. We're looking at the pacing of curriculum because we want to ensure that every student has a full year growth for this year that they are receiving in this blended model or on a full distance learning model, the instruction that they need to cover all of their priority standards for their grade level. We are also talking to a number of people and preparing with our staff development and with our community partners, parent and student training for the online platforms, right? Because we know this was something that was needed, and we did a lot, but we know that we need to do more, and particularly for TK through second grade, where not all schools were able to give devices to their students at TK through second grade because they didn't exist, but we are buying them now. And so for children to be able to really access the online learning and learn from it, we know that there needs to be additional training for the kids and for their families and how to support that. And so we're developing that right now. We're also really looking at the assessment of student learning, and we have purchased a new assessment that will be given online to all students, kindergarten through 8th grade, in September, again in December, and again in March. And the September assessment will give us information about where the student is currently in terms of their current grade level assignment. What did they not learn last year? What do they need to learn this year? What have they already learned, right? It will give us that diagnostic information, and then we will be able to use it for progress monitoring. As I said, it's in language arts and in math, and it's also in Spanish. And so we'll be able to get a lot of really good information about the students with that as we prepare for acceleration and enrichment for our students. There will also be writing assessments that take place 3 times over the school year to ensure that students are developing in their writing genre as per the Common Core standards. We are talking a lot about clarity for the roles of the teacher, the parents, and the students in terms of their responsibilities, their engagement, their attendance, the amount of time online, the amount of time, how they spend it when they're in class. So all of that is being worked on right now. We've been asked for this quite a bit in terms of what are these guidelines, what are the expectations, and we are designing that. And we'll be sharing that when we have that. And we also know that there is a real need to support students who have unique learning needs. And there are many students, and we are, again, talking and planning about what's the best way to provide additional supports for students who need more. And those are our RSP students, those are our newcomer students, our students who have limited access to the internet, students learning a second language, both English, and the students who are in the immersion programs learning Mandarin and learning Spanish, our homeless youth, our foster youth, we've got students who've experienced trauma these past few months, and all of the special education programs. And I wanted to point out here that there is not a big focus on special education at this particular time, but there will be a very big focus next Thursday, June 25th. The focus of that parent webinar will be on special education. So I want you to hold that on your calendars if that's of particular interest for you. So we don't have the answers at this time for all of these student groups, but we're talking about different ways to provide either direct instruction, either before or after school in some of those extra classrooms that I mentioned earlier for the students when their cohort is on campus, how we can provide additional outreach on the 3 days that they are at home in targeted instruction and specific phone calls, different ways for that, right? So we are not ignoring that there are children who have unique needs that need to be met, and we are working on that. So finally, you've asked a number of questions, and I just have a few of these here to say a little bit more about, and then I'm hoping that as we talk, you're writing some of your questions in the chat, and we'll have some more time this afternoon, this evening, to answer those questions, as well as we will be preparing an FAQ when we do have answers. Some of the questions that you've asked we don't have answers to yet. But there's been a lot of questions about the assessment of student learning, and so I've talked a little bit about that in terms of our online exam, which is called iReady. There are also parent notifications with iReady that we can send information to you about your student, your child, as well as you will see at home the iReady platform provides individualized lessons based on your child's assessment scores. So if there needs to be some remediation in certain areas, the iReady provides those remediation lessons. And if that child is way advanced and ready for above grade level work, it will provide some of that for that child as well. Your students are not meant to spend more than 40 minutes a week on these lessons. It's not meant to be its own individualized curriculum. But I just wanted to let you know that there are some additional supports that go along with the assessments that your child will be taking. There's been questions about siblings and school schedules. So one of the solutions that we've come up with, and we're still talking about this, is in terms of trying to get siblings on the same cohort schedule. One of the things that we're thinking about is assigning children by last name, right? So that cohort A would be children with last name A through L, for example. And cohort B that comes on Thursday and Friday would be M through Z, for example. And we would do this district-wide so that if you have your children in different schools, they would all be going to school at the same cohort on the same days. That's a possibility. There's been a lot of questions about the immersion and the bilingual programs. How can families help their children at home when they don't speak the language? And this, of course, is also an issue for our English learners whose parents may speak Spanish and not able to help their children at home with English. So we are having a lot of conversations about the bilingual and the immersion programs, but what happens when they're at school, and then what makes the most sense for them to work on when they're at home. And we have a subcommittee that's working on this, and we're looking at a lot of the target language to be taught when the children are face-to-face with their teachers in classroom, and that there be follow-up practice when they're at home. But there can also be outreach during that time by teachers on special assignments, some of the coaches, some of the additional staff members can also be holding meetings, virtual meetings with the children at home online. And we have also been investigating a number of resources that are available in both Spanish, English, and Mandarin for reading books and additional things that kids can practice on their own. So that is definitely a concern of ours and a focus of one of our subgroups. There's been questions about building community and how does that happen at the beginning of school if it's only half the kids and they have masks on. And believe me, that's been a huge concern on the part of our teachers as well. And so we'll figure this out, right? And so I know that there may be times during the day that students take their masks off if we're being careful and socially distant. And so we'll look at that, maybe for a small portion of the day, we can see each other's faces, but we have to be so careful with this. But we also know that there's been a lot of training for teachers for how to build community online. And that's been a recent training that teachers have had, and how to have find ways for children to engage by asking them questions, having them draw a picture, having them do a number of things as they open up their online lessons to build that sense of community. So this is also a big focus of ours. And then the questions about lunch and recess. Lunch, most likely, unless your child is staying later in the day for additional supports for, if they're staying for RSP or for ELD work, if they're staying a little bit later. Lunch will probably be taken home. There will be snack time in the middle of the day, but at the end of the day, students will receive their lunch and their meals distribution and take that home to eat. That's been a recommendation in terms of being able to clean more effectively if there's not food in a lot of places, but we are looking at that. Recess, the children, of course, will go outside for recess, but what that looks like right now, we don't know. We can stagger the recess times, and students can go outside in their cohort and play and run around, but they'll still need to maintain distance from each other. So the types of games and things that we're doing are probably going to look different than a lot of the group activities that maybe we've done in the past. So with that, I'm through, and I'm turning this over to Kyle, who will be talking about technology. But again, I hope that you are writing some of your questions in the chat, and if we don't have time to talk about them tonight, we will be recording them. We'll have written them down, and we will plan to respond to them through an FAQ on our website as soon as we have answers to them. So thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Kyle Brumbaugh. I'm the Director of Technology and Innovation for the Redwood City School District, and I'd like to be able to share some of the things that we've been working on over the past few months in order to prepare to open school in August of 2020. So what we know right now, based upon what we have done since we've closed schools in March, we've been able to provide over 3,000 Chromebooks, 650 hotspots, and provided tech support to over 850 of our students over the course of the past few months. We've also been able to provide weekly tech support office hours for our teachers so that they can keep up on the newest trends that are being used in remote learning. I also want to let everybody know that there were some things that we did early on in the 2019-2020 school year that really are helping us out right now. So the first thing we did is we migrated to a system called SysCloud, and SysCloud does two very specific things for us. The first thing it does is it backs up all of our student and teacher data in Google Apps, not just once a day, but several times a day, so that if a document or a file is accidentally deleted in Google Apps, we can recover it for teachers and or students. The other thing SysCloud does for us is that it monitors all of the email and documents inside of our Google Apps domain for inappropriate content and self-harm. So please rest assured that we are looking in and making sure that students are using the tools that they have access to appropriately. Alongside of that, we changed our filtering system to a tool called Securely. And Securely now can filter all of our devices on campus and off campus. So regardless of where our Chromebooks and or iPads are that students have in their possession, they're filtered based upon the criteria that we've placed in Securely. So as we start to move on and prep for the beginning of the 2020-2021 school year, these are some of the things that we're working on. First, our three goals that we have. We want to make sure that each student can remain connected to their teachers and classmates, and that whatever we can do to ensure that they maintain those connections, we're going to make sure we do. Second is we want to make sure that each student has access to the tools and curriculum so that they can engage in learning, whether that's inside of our classrooms or remotely, depending upon if we're going to be in a hybrid model or we're going to be in a 100% distance learning model in 2020-21. We also want to make sure, and this is something that we heard loud and clear from some of the suggestions we received from the community, is that we want to make sure that every family has the support they need to support their students, so that each and every student in the Redwood City School District can continue to learn, whether that is in a face-to-face or in a distance learning model. So one of the first things that we're going to make sure that we do to provide that is that we are going to issue a Chromebook as a personal device for all students in grades 2 through 8. So we have about 1,250 Chromebooks coming into the district right now that are new. Most of our Chromebooks have the ability to flip upon themselves, so they can be used as a laptop. They can also be used as a tablet, and many of them have the ability to write on the screen using a stylus. So students could draw, students can write longhand and convert that into actually digital text. We also are working to issue an iPad for all students in grades TK, K, and 1. We know that this is an important group of students that we need to support. Right now, we're about 300 short, but we are looking for additional funding to make sure that we do provide that for each and every student in the district. The other issue that we are really working on from the hardware perspective is internet access. The current hotspots we have right now, we need to renew in August. So we're looking at 3 separate scenarios. One would be going to a new and different hotspot. The second is working with the County of San Mateo to increase the number of free Wi-Fi locations. If you go to smcwifi.org, you can find their website that lists many of the free Wi-Fi locations they already have in the county. Most of them are in county buildings, but we would like to increase the number of those antennas so that our students can get internet access that way. And the third way would be for us to purchase additional hardware to extend the signal of our school sites out into the communities and for the families that those schools serve. So one of the other pieces we're working on are software and applications. So all of our students across the district have access to the Google Suite of apps. The district has also purchased curriculum to assist with at-home learning. That could take the form of amplified ELA. We're also purchasing some of the digital content for the TCI material that the district has used for social studies. We also have purchased an application called Nearpod that has quite a bit of curriculum built into it. We've also purchased a tool called Newsella that is a reading tool that provides nonfiction reading for students at the appropriate grade level. So we want to make sure that each and every one of those kids has access to curriculum apps. And the other app that we have purchased for our younger students is an app called Raz Kids that provides scaled reading for those students as well. We also have purchased several applications to facilitate and support student learning and the connection between home and school. So the first application we've purchased is an application called Seesaw that is focused in on our younger students. It is an application that really creates a connection between teacher, parent, and child. And so that content and classwork can be shared among all 3 so that all 3 of those people, the parent, the teacher, and the child, understand what the expectations are for that student. We've also have Google Classroom that we'll use for all students in grades 3 through 8 that provides the same kind of assignment data, but also allows parents to receive a weekly digest of all of the assignments that their students should be working on in each and every class that they have. And then the third thing that we've purchased is a tool called Read Write for Google Chrome that provides some support for websites or any content that comes through a browser. It will read, it will provide definitions, and it will also translate pages for students who need translation services as well. We're also looking to make sure that we provide access to as many tools as possible for the assignments that our students have on a daily and weekly basis. Now, in the area of curriculum, we're working with the Instructional Materials Center to make sure that we have access to as many textbooks as possible that students use in a digital format. So as we assign a device to each and every student. We want to make sure that we can provide those textbooks on that device. Really important because we're concerned about students transporting books back and forth from home to school. If they have the device and all of the materials are on the device, we really feel that each and every student can be prepared to learn. We're also providing additional independent learning material from outside sources. So we are providing reading material from an app called Epic that has books, scaled books for students in grades 2 through 8. We're also providing the apps for all students to access content from the Redwood City Public Library. So they have 2 apps. One is called Libby that provides access to library books, and the other app is called RB Digital that provides access to magazines. We're also providing access to an app called Rivet that has been created by Google that has about 3,000 nonfiction short reading titles that students can engage with. We also have provided training for our teachers, and we'll continue to provide more training for our teachers so that they can provide digital citizenship and information literacy curriculum through Common Sense Media. This is a website that you are free to go to on your own that provides app reviews. It provides reviews on television and movies, and also bound textbooks and novels as well. So as part of this, we want to keep supporting teachers so that they can provide that content to students and that families can feel confident that their students have access to all the content they need to be able to learn. So the questions that we've kind of heard as we've listened to the surveys that parents have completed during this time period. First of all, that technology support needs to be there during the year. We're looking at several different models, and that support isn't just technical support. That support is, how do I use a certain application? How can I get online? How does my student connect to different services that the district is providing? And so we're looking at multiple ways to provide those services. It's going to come down to how each service is connected into the instructional day, but we are looking at ways to support that. That now dovetails into the next piece, which is, if we do end up going to 100% remote instructional model, how do we support that, and how do we continue to make sure that every student can learn through that entire process? And then the last piece is, how can the Technology and Innovation Services Department ensure equity of access for all Redwood City School District students and families? So that kind of goes back to the connection piece. And then we're working really hard with the county and other entities to see how we can provide that internet access out in the community. And if not, what other things we can bring in to assist families and make sure that all students can learn. If you have any questions, there's time at the end of this webinar to ask those questions. But even after this webinar, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to the Technology Innovation Services Department, and we can provide answers to those questions. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Patty Ortiz. I am the Director of Community Schools and Partnerships for the Redwood City School District, and I am the lead for the subcommittee on childcare. This committee is formed by both school district staff and our amazing after-school partners. I will now share my screen. Well, I want to start by saying that we all know that after school and childcare is very, very important. Many of us in the district are working parents. We have an amazing school team and community partners that are completely and genuinely committed to thinking creatively about finding solutions, giving the possibilities we have as a district. With that said, we wanted to share with you the work we have done so far together. And again, try to think through the process we're engaging with, the limitations and the options that are set forth by the powers that be with their current unfortunate circumstances. But we are committed and we are confident that more solutions will come every day. So for childcare, after school programs, we learned that these programs too must abide by the 4 pillars of after school and safe return. After school programs and any other service providers must keep students in their bubble cohorts to prevent students from mingling in after school. This means their school day cohorts must be kept after school day dismissal, including after school. After school programs will follow the guidelines for the 3 steps of school's reopening. So with that information from the health guidelines, we now know that in order to abide by public health guidelines, including our school's needs for daily cleaning and disinfecting, any after-school care must support the 4 pillars. Therefore, programs will resume operations as of step 2. Only limited areas on campus will be used in order to support a rigorous cleaning schedule per public health guidelines. To maintain the students' cohorts intact, a set number of spaces will only be provided. And after-school programs will be provided only on days when students are on campus. With all this information coming to us from the different public health guidelines, this is what we are working on as a child care subcommittee. Redwood City School District and partners are working together. We are finalizing the numbers of students and classrooms that we will be able to use at each campus for after school. We are finalizing potential schedules. There might be shorter school days for after school considering the daily early dismissal. And Redwood City School District is very strongly advocating for supporting more families, more days. So we know as larger society that our cohort schedules and our current needs to keep our kids safe at school doesn't solve our Monday through Friday 9 to 5 problem. So we are working with the city and county on childcare solutions off campus to support more students and support them during their distance learning days as well. We are also examining the possibility of creating stable cohorts amongst grade level students, but this is all still in the works. We received different questions from you and I wanted to address some of them now. In terms of the process for after school opening, we are working with community partners to expand the offering. As we said, is there any way to do different groups or different days or different areas? We are exploring serving different students on different days to provide more support to more students. Again, we don't always really know what's the best fit, but we are aligning our process with the equity subcommittee recommendations on this. And we will use the survey results that were sent a week ago and other mediums to collect interest from families in joining program. Regarding tuition and costs of running program, we are waiting for new information from the Department of Education on any possible budget changes or flexibility on how to run a program. This basically covers the general webinar, and I really appreciate you being here. But before I go, I did want to say that our students' safety, our students' well-being is our #1 priority. We are thoroughly and really authentically trying to navigate those 2 guiding forces, keeping them safe, keeping them well, while also knowing that we want to serve not just our youth, but our families' well-being. We know childcare is huge. We know parents' ability to go back to work is huge, and we're working strongly on this. Thank you very much.
So during this portion of, I want to thank all the the members that took part in putting this together this evening. And I see there's a lot of questions in the chat. I got kicked off the Zoom a couple times and I have a portion of them. But what I would like each of the panelists to do at this point in time is to look at these questions that are here in the chat and see which ones that we could give an answer to. And also, I know Kyle is going to copy the chat for us so we can take these questions and answer them and put them on our website also. So if we could just take a few minutes. There are many, many questions.
Dr. Baker, I've kind of been reviewing them, and I think to start with, there are a lot of questions around the recess and lunch. I think there were a couple different things that were said. So is recess going to be indoors or outdoors? Will lunch be indoors or outdoors? And why are we not taking lunch just at home? And then also, are we looking at outdoor learning spaces, because outdoors is really important for kind of staying away from the virus?
So let's talk about the part about recess. And as superintendents, as many staff members know, the superintendents of the county of San Mateo meet regularly, like 3 times a week. And we just had a meeting today at 4 o'clock. And as members of the panel have said, there have been changes even today. And if you look at, there's some new orders out that came out yesterday from the county health department. One of the items was definitely in the area of recess, and recess can be taken outdoors. As we discussed previously, recess still needs to go in that cohort at this point in time. It has not changed yet. So my 12 to 15 students that I have in the classroom will be going out to recess outside and can go with the cohort. Now, it was also stated today among the superintendents that during that time when students are outside and they're moving from one area to another area in the school, that they should be wearing their masks. And we kind of all said, but they're outside. So I thought that was better when you're outside and you're out in the fresh air. And they said, well, precautionary, at least under step 1, you should still be wearing your mask. And remember that step 1, according to the county guidelines right now, is for the first 3 weeks of school to see where we are with the virus. Now, with that being said, I noticed there were a couple of questions on the chat that also referred to what is going to happen when a child tests positive in the school. So at this point in time, what I know and what was part of our guidelines is we are notified that the child has tested positive. We are to definitely contact our county office of ed, and the county office of ed will work directly with the health department. We are also to inform parents that there has been a child that has tested positive, and there's a template that Claire Cunningham, the deputy counsel for the county, is putting together for us that will give information to parents of the positive virus. The child who had the positive virus, we're not naming any names or anything like that, but there's a child in the classroom, or there's a child within the school within several cohorts that have the virus. With that being said, there'll be specifics of what the parents need to do. It does not mean at this point in time that the classroom needs to shut down or the school needs to shut down. The health department will help determine that for us. So that's information that we relatively just received within the last week in regarding to that. And then Janet, you also asked about the lunch. I think there was a question about the lunch.
So whether they're eating in the classroom, can they eat it outside, and why not just take it home?
Those are all very good questions. One, we were thinking of it just take it home, and there would be a snack during the day. That's number one. We were hoping that we could go in that direction. Number two, as Ms. Wolf did allude to, especially if a student is staying maybe after school for some other services that are needed, either whether it be intervention for our students that need some additional support, or for other items that we need to work with our students, it would be best if those students had their lunch somewhere, or maybe right before when they left school, they were at 1 o'clock. If that's the time that we determine, they can go and have their lunch before they go into the next session. But Right now, as it stands, we are hoping that if we're having lunch at school, it should be in the classroom. Otherwise, we're going to have many, many students out in the playgrounds during lunchtime, and we want to be able to keep those students, at least for the first 3 weeks, as a cohort. So my classroom would be out as a cohort for lunch. My neighbor's classroom would be out as a cohort for lunch, and you want not to mix these cohorts together. So that was a manner of us trying to not have that occur for that long period of time of lunch. Recess, I think we can stagger the recesses for students to be outside in a manner where it'll only be several classes as a cohort that will go out, and then bring them back in, and then take another cohort of several classes that will go out, and make sure that those cohorts are sticking together with themselves. There was another question that you asked, that you said there was a recess, there was the lunch, there was that you saw on here.
Outdoor learning spaces.
Outdoor learning spaces, that's a great question. Outdoor learning spaces, as we continue to learn what other countries have been doing and what other states are planning also, outside learning spaces are really positive if we can continue to do them. It's great that we could do them, while we have great weather and so forth. So that's definitely a positive that we can look at. But then the problematic piece, as we're learning from other countries, is when the weather is not as great. Then what do you do? Where do you bring them back into the classroom? Are these students that are additional to the class that you have there already as part of your cohort? Is this another cohort of that class that is doing something outside? Or is this another cohort that is coming together to get some type of services because of the needs of the child? So all of that would need to be worked out, but it is definitely something that I think we are, learning more about, and definitely interested in possibly doing for certain times of the year. I'm trying to scroll.
I don't know if other panelists had questions that jumped out. I mean, I can go through and read them all, but there's a lot. So yeah, Sarah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Sarah. Just
there were several questions about the I was just texting Martin. There were several questions about the HVAC system, and we had talked about that in our team. Martin, can you give a little bit more information about the plan for the HVAC system specifically?
Sure. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So currently, what the plan is, and the recommendations is to make sure that we go with a more high efficient filter. We're going to go with a MERV 13 filter, which is a higher grade hospital grade filter for the classrooms. I know there was questions from Michelle, Juan, and Alejandra regarding that. And so we will have the systems on. One of the recommendations, making sure that we have as much outside air into the classrooms. We will be opening our dampers to allow more airflow into the classrooms with that.
Okay. I see there's a question on here regarding childcare, and it's talking, this person has asked, can the old Adelante campus be used for childcare? That was brought up at last night's board meeting, if I'm not mistaken, President Lawson. And as I recall, board members had said, we are looking at everything. So that could be a possibility. I'm not saying yes, I'm not saying no, but it's something that the board last night said it definitely could be something that we should look at. Am I correct, Janet?
Yeah, that's correct. The only open campus we have is the former Adelante one. And a couple of people have asked me about that. So, it's definitely something to consider. And also balancing our need for the revenue that we were counting on for renting out the site. Go ahead, Sarah.
Another question that was asked a lot at the beginning of the chat was about temperature taking and whether it's, should we be doing it? that there's been a lot of change and thinking about temperature taking. So that's evolving as we're coming. Right now, the guidelines say to do it. But as more places open and as we find out whether or not it's an effective tool, we'll be able to adjust accordingly.
Thank you, Sarah. Liz?
Thank you. There are a lot of questions about the amount of screen time for young children. And that's, excuse me, definitely something that our committees are taking a look at. We don't want children who are at home, either in the full distance learning or on the hybrid model, to be spending 4 or 5 hours a day in front of a computer where they might be spending 4 hours a day in the classroom with their teacher, right? And so we are looking at what is the good balance of screen time when the children are at home, and what kind of activities are most appropriate for that time, given the range of grade levels for the students. So those recommendations are being developed by the small committees, taking a look at best practices, taking a look at the applications that are available, which are very interactive and not just, busy work, but are much more engaging, particularly for the little kids. And maybe not everybody has seen these yet because they've been recently purchased for the district. But the balance of time for screen time and home time and enrichment time and activity time, all of that will be prepared for guidance for the different grade levels. There was another question about, should we think about bringing in little kids first, and kind of a rolling start in terms of the grade levels. And so that is also something else that our team is taking a look at. Do we prioritize bringing in the younger children first, giving them some more time to get to know their teachers, have some in-class experiences before they are asked to do more of their work at home online. So those are considerations, particularly for the students who did not have a lot of access to the internet and to the devices this past spring. And so that would be the TK through 2nd grade. And then we're also possibly taking a look at the middle school as the students from 5th grade transition into 6th grade. Should they have a little bit more time with their teachers first, being new to the campus, being new to the middle school? So these are all part of the considerations that our committee is taking a look at.
Right. I'm just going through these. Now, I don't have all of them. When I was off, it took half of the questions. So,
Dr. Baker, I sent you a document with all of the questions pasted into it, so you can scroll through that if you wish.
it's vis-a-vis email on my email.
Via email, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, so there was a question regarding the restrooms, if they're being assessed for touchless flush systems. We are looking into that currently. We currently have some that have the flush system, but we are assessing that. And that was from Scarlett.
There were a couple of questions about the restrooms since you're discussing it. So how often they'll be cleaned? Will all of the kindergarten ones that are inside the classrooms be cleaned hourly? Is there cleaning in between uses?
Yes, so we will have a day custodian. We already have a lead custodian that will be monitoring all the staff and kinder restrooms. And then we will have a day custodian that will be monitoring all the student restrooms throughout the day.
Okay. So there was a question on here in regard to how often teachers would be tested. And so that is something that I know all the school districts in the county are asking our county health department. What we had suggested is that maybe there be a testing center between several, like 2 districts like ourselves, maybe in Menlo Park, and our teachers can be tested on a regular basis. None of that has been approved at this point in time, but I know this question is from Heidi, and that's something that many of our teachers are also concerned about. how often should they be tested? If they're going to be tested, where would that testing be taking place? And so that's something that we're still working on to see how that will occur for the Redwood City School District.
I want to address some of the questions that I'm seeing about masks and how difficult it is for the children. I was on a call someday this week. I don't even know what day it is.
Yesterday.
With this county superintendent, Nancy McGee. And she did discuss the need for masks, but also understanding that it needs to be flexible for the different ages and abilities and disabilities. And so what she suggested would be that for kindergartners, that they would ideally be wearing their mask during 25% of the instructional time. First graders would be about 50%. And then, hi, thank you for my package. I have a little delivery man here. And then third grade and up would be ideally 75% of the time. But then also that's really up to the classroom teacher to decide. And if it's too hard for one student and the teacher's okay with it, they don't have to wear that mask. And there's a lot more flexibility than I think what people understand right now.
Right, and the superintendent's meeting that I was in today, right before this meeting at 4, that was brought up also. And so what was suggested is that there be a balance and that the teacher in the classroom determine that balance. But when a teacher comes to work with a student, you know, like one-to-one, close to them, the teacher should have on the mask and so should the student. So we're all trying to see what type of guidelines we can put together as a county that we can pass on to our parents so that parents know that these are the guidelines that each of the districts are following. But again, there's for each teacher to determine the balance that is needed for their own classroom. But when it comes time for a teacher to work in maybe a small group setting with 1 or 2, 3 students, the teacher should have on the mask and so should the students. That was what was discussed today. Now that's not written in any of our guidelines yet, but it was something that was discussed and I believe will be coming out within the next few weeks to be put into the framework that we're using. Let's see.
So I know we have a couple of hands raised. I don't know if you want to take raised hands or just the chat questions.
You know, we can take raised hands. We have a few it's 7:20 and we're here until 8 o'clock. So I'm okay with taking raised hands. If we can answer the question, we'll answer it. But if not, we will have to write the question down and get back to our parents, because I see a lot of these questions here tonight are all going to be responded by. We're going to write the question, have the response, and put it into the webpage for parents. And I'll have Jorge let everybody know that that's where it is. And please go to that page to see the responses to the questions from this evening. And again, from tomorrow evening. So I don't have, do you want to?
There's 6 Dr. Baker raised hands right now.
Okay, so if you can just, because I don't have access to that and I can't see it. So.
Okay, so I'm just going to go through the first one. So Katie's the first one.
Okay.
And then I'll just ask for those that are speaking in the interest of time, because we only have 40 minutes, if you could keep your questions as succinct as possible so that we can answer them and move on to other questions too.
Hi, this is Katie. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I guess I have 2 questions trying to be succinct. One is, will SST meetings begin again in the fall, happening remotely? I know that was a problem this spring. And sort of related, if there are students who have fallen behind, are you thinking about combo classes?
Good
combo
question.
grade levels.
Good question, Katie. Combo classes. Let's start with the SST meetings. The SST meetings will definitely be taking place this fall. And I know Dr. Polino will be discussing more of this information at the next week's virtual time. So I know they're taking place, but she may even have additional information when she speaks next week. And then for those students that are falling behind, if there would be combo classes. Combo classes, there are pluses and there are minuses. I've had combo classes when I was a teacher and thought they were great. There are some parents and also some teachers that feel differently. So we would have to look at, number one, parents who submitted their responses as to total distance learning, and those parents who returned the responses that wanted the hybrid model. Now, when we're looking at the numbers of students and that parents have requested one model or the other, we're seeing at this point of time, as of today, when I talked to Wendy Kelly, who's our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, there are quite a few parents, and it ranges from preschool through 8th grade, that would like total distance learning. And then for our parents that want to have their children in school and in a distance model right now, there are quite a few of them also. It's not an even balance, so we will need to see the number of students at each grade level whose parents are asking that they return to school. And then we will determine if combo classes will be needed or not. I will probably be talking very closely with the Ed Services team and then with our board members. At this point in time, and this is just me talking, there is no recommendation coming forth. There's not been a vote. But a year ago, when we went through the process of reopening our schools and reimagining it differently, we did not have combo classes that one whole year, if we could avoid it. I'm thinking that these circumstances that we're in right now, and by having students whose parents are very concerned about them coming back to school and want just distance learning, and parents who want their children to have in-school learning along with the distance learning, because of the number of students, my recommendation, as I think more and more about it, I would probably want to find out from Ed Services my thoughts about not having combo classes next year. And then after I have my information, be talking to board members and bring a recommendation to the board. It's not a specific answer to your question, but that's where I am with my thinking at this point in time. Okay.
So the next one is Chris. So Chris, if you unmute yourself, you can speak. We'll move down to Atta.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, thanks a lot for the incredible work that everybody's doing. I know this is not easy. My question had more to do with quality of education during the 2020-21 year. I see that there is a choice between a remote only and a hybrid approach where there would be cohort groups for the hybrid approach attending school 2 days a week with 1 day closed and 2 days remote. I'm just wondering, and I think the hours were something like 8:30 to 1 p.m. or something like that. To me, I was just curious, how will we achieve a high quality of education with shorter hours, 1 day closed and 2 days remote? So that's question number one. And question number two is there a default or recommended approach by the panel, hybrid or remote, and the other option being a fallback? Does the panel believe that one would result in, of course, one will be safer in terms of health benefits and exposure, but does the panel believe one is better than the other in terms of the quality of education?
So Liz, would you like to take that one?
Sure. I think the panel believes that 100% of the students back 100% of the time with teachers in the classroom would be the ideal, right? That's not going to happen anytime soon, but that would be what we would all love to see happen, is because we believe the highest quality instruction and education takes place when the children are with the teachers. And so we have to figure out the best possible choice for students who are going to be not able to be in class full-time with their teachers. And so we are working really hard to make sure that the highest quality educational program is designed for children who are either full-time distance learning, because that could be a possibility for everybody if the virus surges again, or for the families that want to send their children back part-time. We are very seriously looking at this with our committees. We have teachers on our committees, we have principals on our committees, and we are working on this every day to come up with our best recommendations. We're looking at research, we're looking at what's happening in other countries. We are carefully selecting new curriculum that's available online. We're carefully selecting applications that provide for much more interaction than just watching a screen, right? So we're looking at what is probably going to be the future of education for a long time, which is a blended learning model, where some instruction takes place live with a teacher and some instruction takes place not live, but it could still be with the teacher overseeing what's happening through a variety of different options that are taking place with the use of high quality technology. So we share the same interest in wanting to ensure that every student learns to their highest potential with the best quality system that's available, and with as much, our feeling is with as much teacher time as is available as well. But unfortunately, because of the restrictions for that, in order to keep the children and our teachers safe, we can't bring everybody back together at the same time. And so that's what we're trying to figure out, is how to blend their learning in the best possible way.
And then he asked about the default. We really, I guess at this point in time, there is no default. At this point in time, as we are where we are with planning, there is no default at this time. Doesn't say that there won't be one when we reveal the plan on July 15th to the Board of Education. But right now, there is no default at this time. Thank you, Arthur, for your questions.
Okay, so the next one is Michelle Smith.
Okay.
Hi, Dr. Baker. I just had two, and all of the panelists, I just had two quick questions. One is, one of the concerns that I heard a lot from teachers in the lower grades is about the kids not being able to see them. And I know you've already talked about the county being a little bit less restrictive on, or less strict on them having to wear them. But are face shields, or like clear face shields, something that is a alternative that has been discussed? And my second question is, will families who are able to use their own devices, like their own, we have our own Chromebooks and tablets, to sort of relieve some of the burden on the district for devices? Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
So I think Sarah wanted to tackle the face shield.
Sarah can do that, yes.
Thank you. I actually had already written it down because it had been coming up. We've talked extensively about face masks and face shields. What all the data is saying is that face shields are great, but they're not enough. There's too much ability for the droplets to get in if there's nothing covering the mouth specifically. We have looked at a variety of different types of masks. So for example, for students who need to see a mouth movement, there's clear mask options. So all of that is things that we're working on, but effective, like just simple shields don't work. by themselves, basically. We have talked about the option of having both, like both a mask and a face shield. And maybe if teachers are working very closely with each other or with the students, like they're trying to do specific things, they might be able to use them kind of in tandem. But that, again, I know it's, and I saw a lot of comments about sort of teachers' concerns about whether or not they're comfortable with the kids taking their masks on and off. That, we totally get that. Hi, Michelle. I know, I see you, and I totally understand that concern. It's definitely something that will have to be addressed sort of as we go. Superintendent McGee sort of said it haphazardly almost in the meeting. So as we've watched this, what we see is things kind of change and ebb and flow. So while we're giving you a lot of information about shields and face coverings and so forth, you know, it's something that we'll continue to hone and figure out what is and isn't going to work sort of over the course of time.
And then for the use of your own devices, you definitely can use your own devices. Thank you so much. That really helps us in the district. So thank you. Thank you, Michelle.
Okay, so the next one is Jennifer Tomasino.
Okay.
Hi, Dr. Baker. So my question is regarding the one-on-one aids. My son has a one-on-one aid, and it was really hard for him when we switched to distant learning. So how is the district tackling that, given we're going into the new school year and right now everything's still up in the air and we might just continue to do distant learning? That extra help it was great for him to succeed when he entered fourth grade, but now I want to make sure that he still has that help that he needs.
So in your latest IEP, and I don't know if you had it before school ended, if he still has a one-on-one aid, he will still continue to have it in the fall when he returns to school. If you haven't had your IEP, then that's a good question for Dr. Polino, and I can definitely relay that information to her. But our one-on-one aids, what we want them to do is have the training definitely during the time when, you know, if your child is at home doing distance learning, so that the one-on-one aid can have access to what your son is doing and also help them in that manner. When your child is at school, the, and Dr. Polino is she's listening, she said. She's texting me at the same time while I'm answering your question. So the one-on-one aid, when your child is at school, the one-on-one aid will be able to work with your child when your child is back at school. The adults are able to come into the room, as Ms. Wolf was saying, the instructional aides and so forth, and they will leave the room. But what we can't have coming in the room are other groups of children. So the one-on-one aid will still be there, and the one-on-one aid will also be assisting your child during the distance learning portion of the time when he is at home. Okay. And you can and make sure you touch base with Dr. Polino next week, because she will be addressing some of these items in her presentation.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So the next speaker is Pam Barish.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for your time tonight and answering many of these questions.
Hello, my buddy.
Hello, my buddy. I put this in the chat before and it didn't get answered. If a family chooses to do distance learning and come October, they choose to go back into the classroom, will that happen, or is it one and done?
Right, that's a very, very good question. What I know today,
I'm full of them.
Okay, what I know today, Pam, that for the cohort that is coming into your classroom, that cohort that's coming in August, we're probably the 12 to 15 kids, that cohort needs to be that cohort for at least the first 3 weeks. I cannot bring another kid in if one to leave. Now, if we go into step number 2, there's a possibility if we have had we're going into step number 2, and step number 2 would be that there's no new viruses that have we've had any children with any positive virus conditions, their parents, there hasn't been anything. And the rates within San Mateo County are low and they're not spiking. Then there is a possibility, if you have room in your classroom, that you could bring a kid in during step 2.
Got it. Okay, so then let me follow up with that, because Redwood City School District is notorious with their school of choice program to say, wait 10 days and then we move and shuffle kids around. I assume under this model, we will not have any moving and shuffling around on the 10th day of school.
You are correct, because I cannot, again, during those first 3 weeks, in step number 1, I'm not to bring in other students into that cohort.
Good, we're going to hold you to that, Dr. Baker.
Well, it says that in the framework, so I have to do it. You can hold me to it, Pam.
Okay. So the next speaker is Osvaldo Mendoza.
No, I'm listening.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Evening, I should say. My question is one that's been echoed by several other parents, and one actually brought to light that it's not only dual income families, however, single parents also fall victim to this. And with the two models presented, both the distance learning model and the blended model, are these decisions set in stone where these are the only two options that will be available? Because working families and single parent households are unable to meet these obligations and pick up their children at appropriate times without sacrificing work, income, or taking on an additional burden of childcare that just seems unfeasible.
At this point in time, this is what we have. What we also are looking at is the guidelines that we're following. I know childcare is a huge issue. We've heard it loud and clear, and it's not only Redwood City, it's throughout the county. That's why we're seeking outside assistance for all the schools within the county regarding the childcare piece, because as it's laid out right now, as Ms. Ortiz was explaining about childcare, it has to stay in those cohorts. And when you have childcare and the cohort is only, say it's 15, there's more than 15 kids in one grade level at a school site that needs childcare. So we need additional assistance, even if we were to use Adelante as a school for childcare from an outside entity that could help us with it. So this is problematic up and down the county and throughout the Bay Area. So we hear you, but at the same time, we need to follow the guidelines of the cohort, the stable cohort, and we have to follow the cleaning guidelines on also. So Mr. Mendoza, I totally get it, and all of us get it. And it's not that I'm not heartless. If I could provide childcare for everybody in classrooms that we're not using on a regular basis, I'd do it in a heartbeat. So one of the community members out in our community of Redwood City has said, why don't we start asking faith groups? Why don't we ask other entities that have buildings that are not being utilized if they wouldn't mind partnering with the Redwood City School District for childcare, knowing that that the childcare provider still has to adhere to the guidelines. And so we're doing as much as we can and getting you as much information as we can before school starts.
Now, one additional question that would carry over from that would be, if the cohorts are created and there's sufficient amount that allow for one classroom of, say, a lower grade entry level, as my daughter this is her first step into school, she's entering kindergarten. if there's a stable cohort that would be able to utilize that full week, or even if they do 2 days, 1 day of deep cleaning and 2 days on, given that they're entry-level students and it's more important to have face-to-face education, is there any plans to have different cohorts or models for the lower grades versus the higher grades in the school?
The Ed Services Department is looking at that at this point in time. I believe Ms. Wolf, when she was talking about the cohort models, there is some thinking that for especially those TK, kindergarten, first grade students, maybe it's best to bring them back for a longer period of time, or you just bring them back for the first couple weeks and they're still in their cohort. But all of that depends the number of students, and remember the number of classrooms we have at each school and the number of kids that will be in each of those cohorts. This is entirely different from when school normally just opens. We welcome everybody. We can have, up to 30 kids in a classroom, and we're on our way. This is a whole different ballgame for us to look at all these different pieces of the framework and how to meet those pieces and still provide a fantastic education for your child. I know that did not answer your question, but that's where we are at this point in time.
Okay, the next speaker is Olga Ruiz. Okay, I tried to unmute. You're not, so we'll just move on. So the next one would be Michelle Fogarty.
Hi, thank you so much for your time. So my question is regarding the cohorts, and actually my question in general is just when we can expect them to be established, but I also want to additionally ask, Katie Shatara had asked when decisions would be due about families choosing 100% distance or blended, which I imagine would fall into when the cohorts can be developed. And Jesse had also asked if diversity and representation will be paramount in making those decisions, besides also honoring sibling requests and so forth. So I understand it's a tricky ask, but I'm wondering when we might expect to see that, especially if we're trying to increase our social pods over the summer.
Correct. And that's a good question, because there has been parents that are interested in these social pods and want to come meet with our child care subgroup about these social pods and see how they can help us in the community with these social pods. So in answer to your question, on July 15th, the plan is going before the board for my recommendation to the board. If the board approves the plan on that day, we will start working diligently on what those schedules will look like. And you will be, parents who completed the parent survey, and as I said previously, I was working with Ms. Kelly on this afternoon, and so we have the names of parents, their child, all their information on how to get a hold of them, those that requested total distance learning and those that wanted school and distance learning, that's going to do the hybrid. So we are going to start contacting them next week to see if they're definitely settled one way or another. There are some parents that are definitely in the mind, as I've said previously at board meetings, that have written me and said they are not returning to school until there's a vaccine and they want distance learning. So with that being said, and there are a lot of parents, as I said this evening, that have asked for that distance learning model from pre-K through 8th grade in this district. I think if I recall the number, it was around, about 800 and some odd students, and equally about the same amount that would like to have the in-school time. So we need to find out within the next few weeks, if you are one of those parents that contacted that listed on your survey, this is what you wanted. Is this what you really meant? Because if it is, that's the phase that we're going to put you in. So, Mrs. Fogarty, if you're answered the survey, you're one of those that I'm talking about, you'll be getting a phone call within the next few weeks to see if this is really your true decision, one way or the other. And then that'll help us determine the number of students that will be at each grade level at each school with the cohorts that we will develop between 12 and 15 students. I'm sorry it wasn't more definite than that. And then you had there was another piece to it. There were like
Just
three pieces.
the diversity and equity
The
being
diversity,
taken into consideration, and then
it's taken into consideration at each school, because I need to make sure that I keep my cohorts that are at the school sites at this point in time. So I'll look at the diversity and the equity that's at the school. When I'm looking at diversity and equity, I'm not only looking at socioeconomics, I'm looking at our children who are special needs students, because they're diverse and they need to be into, the least restrictive environment. I'm looking at students who are also English language learners, and they need to be in an environment with other students who are fluent in English. So when I'm looking at diversity, I'm looking at the school site.
okay, so I know you can't provide a definitive date, but ultimately the info will go to the board July 15th, and then it will take some time beyond that date in order to define those cohort groups. So I'm guessing we're looking at like late July, early August before cohort groups will be known.
Probably late July. We're trying to get that information as soon as possible. I know Ms. Kelly said today she wanted to start getting a group together to call the parents that definitely specified what they wanted on the survey, to make sure if that's true and then they're gonna stick to that.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, so what was there? Thomas Portman. So I'll go to the next one. D.A. Martinez.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Hi. So I missed a lot of the meeting because Zoom kept kicking me out, and I was wondering if you're going to be sending some more information. Like even now, as you guys are talking, it keeps going in and out the whole meeting. Are you guys going to send at the end all the information that was on this meeting? I know it's also on tomorrow, but I just wanted to make sure because I have a lot of questions.
I'm sure you do. Yeah. So
go ahead.
I believe Jorge's on the line, isn't he? Is Jorge on the? Jorge?
I am.
You are. Would you like to explain to the parent the next process and how she can reach, this video that we're showing tonight with information? This is Jorge Quintana. He's our Director of Communications.
Hello, good evening, everyone. So yes, so the video will be posted on the district website maybe tomorrow afternoon. And in addition to that, we'll make sure to push it out through texting and email as you've been receiving information regarding this plan. So look for it on the website and look for it through texting or through email. It's going to be attached to the SMORE template that we use.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll go ahead and look at that. And then if I do have questions, I'll go ahead and ask them tomorrow at the meeting. I want to review it first, as I know there's a lot of people that have questions. So thank you for that. I'll look for it.
Thank you.
Okay, Chris Rozon.
Hi, how are you? I just kind of wanted to reiterate, push a little harder back on some of these cohort questions. I think when we start talking about childcare and aftercare, one thing that we sort of have to realize is that parents who are having kids at home during the day when they're working are probably going to have to find alternate arrangements for those days. So even if you have a beautifully constructed cohort of 12 kids moving in unison those 2 days a week, those kids are all going to scatter into the community. And a lot of them are going to end up in other kind of unofficial ad hoc social bubbles that mix and match over time. So I don't know I know it's out of your control, but I think there should be some more pressure put on the county to clarify that kind of guideline, because it'll work beautifully for the 2 days that the kids are on the campus. And unfortunately, once they get off the campus, it's all going to fall apart. I really believe. And want to throw out one thing real quick regarding the survey. When the survey went out, we could only choose one option of, did we want before care, after care, or off day care? We couldn't choose multiple options. So it's likely that, you know, we would want more than one. Most of us would want at least 2 of those. So I think your totals are probably misleadingly low on those survey results.
On the daycare results, is that what you're saying? Daycare results, because daycare, it's overwhelming. The results are overwhelming.
But I'm saying, so like we would have chose aftercare and off.
Right,
day.
and what some people did, Chris, is they also wrote, you were able to respond. Some people wrote questions and some wrote statements. And so there are a lot of statements that want all of them.
Yes.
All of the above, all of the above.
Just kind of pointing out, you know, everyone that I've talked to had picked one, but in fact they wanted 2 or 3 of those options.
Right, right. I get it.
I
totally get it.
And again, just for the cohorts, you know, like it's going to happen in the real world. People are going to mix and mingle around, and people are going to create kind of ad hoc, you know, childcare swaps and stuff like that. So the perfect model is going to fall apart pretty quickly in the real world.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So Mendoza's.
So a question, Dr. Baker, just following up on you're saying that you need to put together the cohorts. A few of us are relatively uncertain of what the world will look like in August or at the beginning of August. So if we decide right now that we do want to go cohort, but then decide to go back to a full online distance learning, that seems to be doable, but not the other way around. In other words, if we decide right now that we're going to go full distance learning and then decide that the world is not so bad in August, we're not able to do the cohort. Is that correct?
At this point in time, yes. According to the guidance, it's that for those first 3 weeks. At one time, it was more than 3 weeks when it first came out. I can't remember how long. I think, Janet, it was 10, 8 to 10.
For the first.
They first called it phases. Now it's steps.
Yeah,
the first 6 to 8.
It was 6 to 8 weeks.
It was 6 to 8 weeks, but now it's been that step 1 is 3 weeks. So within that 3-week period, you have no students who have tested positive for the virus. Parents haven't tested positive for the virus, so say it's very minimal. Then you're able to move on to step number 2. And step number 2 would then, if there is space for a child that wants to come back into distance learning and there is space in a cohort, you can then bring someone in. But you can't do anything during those first 3 weeks of step 1. It's that cohort. Once that cohort is made, as of today, you hold on to that cohort for 3 weeks. And then you're going to be looking again at the number of cases at the school site that children or parents have tested positive. And also you're also looking at the San Mateo County rate of those people who have tested positive also. So you are correct in what you asked me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alice Harkey.
Hi, thanks for entertaining my question. I was curious if any thought had been given to a 4-day school week so that the kids that are on site could stay in school longer and potentially reduce the need for after school care, to the point of the previous question that cohorts get destroyed pretty fast when kids are socializing outside of school, and then just give everybody a wholesale day off to catch up on work or do whatever activities at home.
Would the facilities group like to take that? It was in regard to the cleaning, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm not going to speak for you.
I mean, hi, I can. Hi, Alice. She's
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. I was like, oh, there's a lot of reasons. Largely, it has to do with how we can effectively kind of clean between cohorts and also sort of work rule stuff. We can continue to look at it. We are finding creative ways, but there's also a lot of sort of thoughts about kids having some consistency with schedule, sort of at least seeing their teachers during the week. They know like they'll see them at some point during the week. So there's a lot of options. A lot of districts are considering a variety of different things, but largely what we had been focusing on was how do we sort of effectively clean. As we were beginning the process, there was a lot of talk about how we utilize our custodial staff effectively, and that was really what had been driving a lot. Martin,
Could they just start like stagger the custodial staff so that they come in later and stay later to clean? And I don't know. I think time with the teachers is incredibly important. So if they could be there from like 9 to 4, that to me is better than like 9 to 8:30 to 1 or whatever. Obviously, I think things might change down in as we know more and learn a lot from other countries that are in school now, but. You know, as much time with the teachers as safely as possible would be amazing.
We hear you, believe me.
We want the same thing. Martin, did you want to add?
No, I was just gonna say that's right, Sarah. So that's Alice. One of the things that we are doing, we are looking into the custodial staff, but we have to make sure that the facilities is cleaned on a daily basis to keep up to the standards. We also have to make sure that, we're not violating any contracts, because there's unions that they're involved with that we would have to negotiate as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. And I think we have time for one more.
Okay, Jennifer Torres.
Jennifer Torres.
Hi, good evening. Will there be changes on how instruction will look like for instructional assistants in special education?
That's a very good question, what that would look like for instructional assistants in education. I know Dr. Polino will definitely handle this question next week since she's listening right now, but I know there's a lot of training that instructional assistants in special ed have been taking. Not only since we've been out of school for a few months, but also prior to coming back. So she has a plan. So Jennifer, I'm going to give her your question and make sure that she goes over that next week when she talks about the training for her special ed instructional assistants.
Okay. And one other question, as a parent, I have a student that goes to one of the schools in Redwood City. How will drop off and pick up will look like starting in August?
Good question. That's something that I believe the facilities committee is working on. I'll give it to Sarah or Martin, whoever wants to take it.
Drop off and pick up is my life. This is all I do, even during normal school. So that's something we're working through. We're going to work on timeframes and maps and so forth. It will be largely dependent on school sites. So as each principal kind of gets the information about what our schedule is and how it works, we will each be developing sort of a drop-off pickup at each site. So it'll probably depend on your site. I mean, I could go on about our site, but I don't know what site you're at. So yeah,
every site is unique. You're right, Sarah.
All right, thank you.
All right,
just to add to that.
Oh, you're right.
It also depends on the phases that we're in. So we have to look at what is going to be the most protective in each phase that we can do, and where we can easily bring students to where they need to be immediately in the morning, and how they're going to exit so that we maintain that distancing throughout both entering and exiting.
Thank you, Michelle. So it is 8:02. So all the questions that we have Give us some time. We'll get, today is Thursday. Hopefully by next week at this time, we can get those answers to the questions that are on the chat. There are a lot of them, but I think we can answer quite a few of them. And the ones that we can't answer, we're looking into it and we'll get back to it, okay? Thank you all so much for coming this evening to this first virtual presentation. As I said earlier, there will be other presentations coming in the following weeks. And Ms. Wolf did indicate to you all that next week on the 25th will be the presentation on special education, which Dr. Polino will be presenting, I think, with some of her staff. So thank you so much again. Janet, did you want to say anything before?
I just want to say thanks to everybody who came out. There were so many people that are here, and if, you know, I'm definitely going to be sending this out to a lot of people who couldn't make it. So a lot of good questions, and we'll make sure they get answered.
Definitely. Thank you all. Have a good night. Thank you.